I waited 2 hours for Jordan. She never came. Instead, a stranger sat down in her chair. She smiled like she already knew my name. "You're Alex," she said. "I need to talk." My coffee went cold. My hand started shaking. She placed an old photograph on the table. It was Jordan, crying, in a place I'd never seen. "There's something you deserve to know," she whispered. "My name is Alex Rivera, a features writer for a Chicago newspaper, 31 years old, cautious with my heart after years of hiding who I truly was. That December afternoon at a cramped cafe on Milwaukee Avenue, I expected an ordinary reunion with my ex-girlfriend Jordan, not a stranger holding secrets that would unravel everything I believed. The stranger introduced herself as Sam Whitfield, Jordan's cousin from Milwaukee, though I had never once heard Jordan mention her existence before. Sam's eyes were the same warm brown as Jordan's, but sharper, more guarded, like she was measuring how much I could handle hearing. She said Jordan asked her to come in her place, unable to face me after what happened between their families last month. I remembered how Jordan and I met 3 years earlier, at a pride festival downtown, both of us reaching for the same umbrella in the rain. We had fallen fast, moving in together within a year, planning a future neither of our families fully understood or accepted. Then 6 weeks ago, Jordan vanished without warning. Her phone disconnected. Her apartment suddenly empty. No explanation left behind for me. I had spent every day since replaying our last conversation, searching for the moment I missed the warning signs of her leaving. Sam watched me carefully, twisting a napkin between her fingers, clearly deciding how much truth I could bear to hear that afternoon. "Jordan's parents found out about the wedding registry," Sam finally said. "The one you two secretly started building online together." My stomach dropped. I hadn't realized anyone outside us knew we'd quietly begun planning a future, ring included, months before she disappeared. Sam explained that Jordan's father, a deacon at their family's church, discovered the registry and confronted Jordan the same night she vanished. "They sent her somewhere," Sam said quietly, glancing away. "Somewhere meant to change her, to make her forget you existed entirely." I felt the floor tilt beneath me, grief and fury colliding, as Sam reached across the table and steadied my trembling hand. Sam offered to stay in Chicago a few more days, promising to help me search for any trace of where Jordan's parents sent her. We began meeting most evenings, comparing notes, calling churches and retreat centers, chasing rumors that led nowhere but exhaustion. Despite the fear driving us, I found myself looking forward to Sam's text, small check-ins that felt like tiny anchors. She had an architecture degree from a school in Madison, and talked about buildings the way other people talked about music. One evening she sketched the cafe skyline on a napkin, explaining how light changes a structure's entire personality throughout the day. I laughed for the first time in weeks, surprising myself, surprising her too. Judging by the way her smile softened instantly, Sam admitted she rarely let people see her sketch, calling it something private, almost embarrassing, reserved only for quiet, trusted company. We started walking along Lake Michigan after our meetings, the cold wind sharp, our conversation somehow warmer than the weather allowed. She told me about her own family, strict and traditional, though less openly hostile than Jordan's, more silently disapproving instead. "I never officially came out to them," Sam confessed one night, staring at the dark water instead of meeting my eyes. I understood that silence completely, having spent years choosing careful words, softening truth, protecting people who didn't deserve that protection. Slowly, our search calls became shorter, our personal conversations longer, until I realized I was memorizing details about Sam I shouldn't. She remembered that I took my coffee black, that I hated cilantro, that I always tucked my hair behind my left ear when nervous. I caught myself doing the same, noticing she chewed her pen cap while thinking, that her laugh started before the joke finished. Guilt crept in quietly. reminding me that Jordan was somewhere frightened and alone while I sat comfortable, distracted by her own cousin. So, when Sam squeezed my hand goodbye one night, I didn't pull away. And neither of us mentioned it afterward. We visited 3 different retreat centers listed under Jordan's father's church network, each visit ending in polite denials and closed doors. Sam grew furious after the 3rd rejection, slamming her car door, admitting she'd always resented how her family treated queerness like sickness. I should have protected her sooner, Sam said, voice cracking. Instead of staying quiet to keep peace in my own house, I told her that wasn't her burden to carry alone, that we would keep searching together, no matter how long it took. That night she stayed later than usual, and we talked until 2 in the morning about everything except what was growing between us. My best friend Priya noticed the shift first, teasing me gently about how often Sam's name came up in casual conversation. You light up differently when you talk about her, Priya said, and I had no honest answer to give her back. I tried convincing myself this connection was only gratitude, only shared purpose, nothing more complicated than 2 people united by worry. But when Sam missed a night of searching, citing a work deadline, I felt an ache far too specific for simple gratitude. She showed up the next evening anyway, exhausted, apologizing, bringing my favorite pastry from a bakery clear across the city. I couldn't stop thinking about you, she admitted quietly, then immediately looked away, embarrassed by how much she'd revealed. Something shifted permanently between us that night. An unspoken agreement neither of us was ready to name out loud yet. We kept searching for Jordan, driven equally now by guilt, love, loyalty, and a growing fear neither of us discussed openly. Sam began sharing older memories of Jordan, stories from childhood summers, painting a fuller picture of the woman I thought I knew. I learned Jordan had always been the family's golden child, expected to marry well, expected to erase any inconvenient parts of herself. Hearing this made my anger toward her family sharpen, but also soften something protective and tender toward Sam's own quiet suffering. One rainy afternoon, stuck inside my apartment waiting out a storm, Sam admitted she'd once been engaged to a man from her hometown. It ended 2 years ago, she said carefully. When I realized I was lying to both of us the entire time, I asked if her family knew the real reason the engagement ended, and she shook her head, staring down at her hands. They think I got cold feet, she said. Easier than explaining, I couldn't keep pretending to want a life that wasn't mine. I recognized that particular loneliness instantly. The exhausting work of managing everyone else's comfort, while quietly disappearing inside yourself. We sat in comfortable silence after that confession, rain streaking the windows, our shoulders barely touching on the small couch. Something about that stillness felt more intimate than any grand declaration could have. 2 guarded people finally choosing honesty together. Weeks passed with no solid lead on Jordan's location, our hope thinning, though our bond somehow kept steadily, quietly strengthening. Sam started leaving small things at my apartment, sweater, a sketchbook, until her presence felt less like visiting and more like belonging. I noticed I no longer dreaded coming home to an empty apartment, because it rarely stayed empty for very long anymore. One evening, cooking dinner together, our hands brushed reaching for the same spoon, and neither of us moved away first. Alex, Sam said softly, setting the spoon down. I need to tell you something before this goes any further between us. My heart pounded, certain she was about to confess guilt, or fear, or some reason we shouldn't let this continue happening. Instead she said, I think I'm falling for you, and I don't know how to feel good about that yet. I admitted the same feeling had been building in me too, tangled painfully with guilt over Jordan's continued, frightening absence. We agreed that night to keep searching for Jordan honestly, while allowing ourselves this fragile, complicated thing growing quietly between us. Sam kissed me gently on the forehead before leaving, a promise rather than a declaration, careful not to rush what mattered. I lay awake afterward, Torn between hope for a new beginning and loyalty to the woman I still desperately wanted found safe. 2 days later, a private investigator Sam hired finally called back with a lead, a religious retreat center outside rural Wisconsin. We packed the car that same night, driven by urgency, unaware how much that trip would upend everything we'd carefully built. The drive to rural Wisconsin took 4 hours, mile after mile of frozen fields, Sam's hand resting steady on my knee. We arrived at a gated property with a plain wooden sign reading New Path Fellowship Retreat. No other identifying markers visible. A woman at the front desk denied any knowledge of a guest named Jordan Bennett. Her expression practiced, rehearsed, unreadable. Sam pressed harder, mentioning Jordan's father by name, and the woman's composure cracked just slightly before she asked us to leave. Outside, we spotted a resident through a fenced garden, thin and pale. And my stomach lurched thinking it might be Jordan. It wasn't her. But the young man's hollow eyes told me exactly what kind of place this really was inside. We called the local sheriff's office, but were told without a formal complaint from family, they couldn't intervene in private programs. Frustrated and furious, Sam admitted she needed to call her own parents, hoping they might pressure Jordan's father into transparency. That call went badly. Her mother accused her of choosing that lifestyle over family loyalty, then hung up without saying goodbye. Sam sat in the car afterward, shaking. And I held her the way she'd held me weeks earlier at the lake. "I'm done protecting people who won't protect us back," she said finally, wiping her eyes, voice steady with new resolve. We drove home defeated but determined, agreeing to hire a lawyer specializing in wrongful confinement cases within religious institutions. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Renata Cole, warned us these cases moved slowly, especially when families cooperated with the facility. Meanwhile, news of our search reached my newspaper editor, who gently suggested I take leave before the story affected my judgment. I refused, insisting I could separate personal stakes from professional ethics, though privately I wasn't entirely convinced that was true. Sam's ex-fiancé unexpectedly reappeared, calling to ask if the engagement rumors circulating among their hometown friends were somehow connected to me. "Word travels fast in small towns," Sam said bitterly, admitting her family had likely spread rumors to save face publicly. The added pressure strained something between us, small irritations surfacing that hadn't mattered before the stress multiplied so quickly. I snapped at her one night over nothing, really, and immediately regretted it, watching hurt flash across her tired face. "I'm not her replacement," Sam said quietly, "and I need you to stop treating me like a placeholder for Jordan." Her words stung because they held truth I hadn't fully admitted. That guilt still shaped how I loved her. We took a few days apart, both exhausted, both needing space to untangle grief from genuine, growing romantic feeling. During that silence, I visited my own mother, finally telling her everything. Jordan's disappearance, Sam, the complicated tangled mess of my heart. My mother, surprisingly gentle, reminded me that loving someone new didn't erase or dishonor whatever I'd felt for Jordan before. Her acceptance, quiet and unconditional, gave me courage to call Sam and ask her to please come back. Properly, honestly. Sam returned that weekend, and we talked for hours, finally naming what scared us both about loving each other openly. "I'm afraid of losing you the way I might lose Jordan," I admitted. "Afraid this all falls apart eventually anyway." Sam promised she wasn't going anywhere, though we both knew promises meant little against families willing to send loved ones away. Renata called with progress. A judge agreed to review Jordan's case, citing insufficient documentation proving her voluntary participation in the program. Hope flickered again. Fragile but real. As we prepared testimony describing everything we'd learned about the retreat's isolating practices, Jordan's father, informed of the legal challenge, sent a furious email accusing me of destroying his daughter's chance at a normal life. I forwarded the email to Renata without responding, refusing to let his cruelty derail the progress we'd fought so hard for. Sam's relationship with her own parents deteriorated further after she testified voluntarily, describing patterns of pressure within their shared extended family. "I might lose them completely," she told me. "But I'd rather lose people who never really saw me clearly anyway." I admired her courage fiercely, recognizing how much harder it was to lose family than to simply fear losing them. 2 weeks later, the court ordered an official welfare check at the Wisconsin facility, with law enforcement present for oversight. We weren't allowed inside, forced instead to wait outside the gates, Sam gripping my hand as officers disappeared through the doors. An hour passed in unbearable silence before an officer finally emerged, confirming they'd located a woman matching Jordan's description. Relief crashed over me so hard my knees nearly buckled. Sam catching me, both of us crying against the cold fence. But the officer added quietly that the woman inside had refused to leave, insisting she was there entirely by choice. My relief curdled instantly into confusion and fresh heartbreak, unable to understand how anyone could choose that isolation willingly. Renata requested a private conversation with Jordan, away from facility staff, to properly assess whether her choice was truly voluntary. Jordan agreed only to speak with me directly, refusing lawyers, refusing Sam, insisting our history entitled me to answers first. Sam squeezed my hand before I walked toward the building alone, whispering, "Whatever she says, we'll figure it out together." Inside a sparse visiting room, Jordan looked thinner, paler, but her eyes held a clarity I hadn't seen in months. "I'm not being held against my will," she said immediately. "I came here myself, after my father found the registry." Confused, I asked why she'd let everyone believe otherwise, why Sam had described this place as punishment rather than choice. "Sam doesn't know everything," Jordan said carefully. "I asked for space to figure out who I actually am, away from you." She explained the retreat wasn't purely religious conversion, but a mixed program, and she'd stayed voluntarily to process years of suppressed identity confusion. "I love you," Jordan said, "but I was never certain if I loved you, or just the escape you represented from my family." Her honesty devastated and freed me simultaneously, unraveling months of guilt I'd been carrying over a disappearance that wasn't quite what I believed. I left that visiting room changed, unsure how to explain this complicated, unexpected truth to Sam waiting anxiously outside. I told Sam everything in the parking lot, watching relief and confusion war across her face as the story unfolded. "She chose to stay," Sam repeated slowly, "meaning I dragged us both through months of fear for a choice, not a rescue." Sam felt betrayed by Jordan's silence, furious that her cousin had let her believe the worst instead of simply reaching out honestly. I understood her anger, but also felt strange sympathy for Jordan, who'd clearly been drowning in confusion no one bothered to see. The drive home was tense, quiet, both of us processing an outcome neither relief nor tragedy, just complicated, unfinished business. Over following weeks, Jordan began writing me letters from the retreat, explaining her journey toward understanding her own fluid, uncertain identity. She wasn't rejecting being queer, she wrote, but working through years of forced performance, unsure which parts of herself were authentically hers. Reading her letters stirred old tenderness in me, alongside newer, steadier feelings for Sam that refused to simply disappear or fade. Sam noticed the letters on my counter one evening, her expression carefully neutral, though tension tightened visibly across her shoulders. "Are you still in love with her?" she asked directly, refusing to dance around the question any longer between us. I answered honestly, admitting complicated lingering care for Jordan, but insisting my choice, my future, belonged clearly with Sam now. She didn't fully believe me, and honestly, some days, neither did I. Caught between grief-shaped love and something newer, braver. Meanwhile, Sam's family escalated their disapproval, her mother showing up unannounced at her apartment, demanding she end things with me immediately. Sam refused, standing firm for the first time in her life against her mother's carefully constructed expectations of who she should love. The confrontation ended badly, her mother threatening to cut her off financially from the small family business she'd hoped to inherit. Sam came to me shaking that night, admitting she just lost her financial safety net, choosing honesty over inherited family comfort. I offered whatever support I could, though guilt gnawed at me, aware her sacrifice existed partly because of our complicated situation. "Don't apologize for existing," Sam said firmly. "I chose this. Chose you. And I won't let guilt shrink either of us." Jordan, released from the program weeks later, unexpectedly showed up at my newspaper office, asking for one honest conversation between us. Sam wasn't with me that day, and something in Jordan's presence pulled me back toward memories I thought I'd already resolved. "I think I made a mistake," Jordan admitted, leaving without explanation, choosing confusion over simply talking honestly with you like adults. She asked, carefully, whether there was any chance for us, now that she'd done difficult, necessary work understanding herself more fully. I felt the old pull, powerful and disorienting, forcing me to confront exactly how settled my feelings for Sam truly were. I told Jordan I needed time to think, unwilling to make promises while still tangled in unresolved grief and old affection. That evening, I didn't tell Sam about Jordan's visit immediately, a small omission that would later become a much larger problem. Sam found out anyway, through a mutual friend who'd seen Jordan leaving my office building, and confronted me feeling deeply betrayed. "You didn't think I deserved to know?" she asked, hurt sharpening every word. Echoes of past family secrecy clearly resurfacing painfully. I apologized, explaining I hadn't wanted to hurt her unnecessarily, though I recognized immediately how thin that justification actually sounded. "Secrets are secrets," Sam said, "no matter how carefully you package the reason. And I've had enough of those already." She left my apartment that night, and for the first time since we'd met, I genuinely feared losing her completely. Days passed in silence, both of us stubborn, wounded, unwilling to reach out first despite how deeply we clearly missed each other. I finally called Priya, admitting I'd sabotaged the healthiest relationship of my life out of fear disguised as protectiveness. "So fix it," Priya said bluntly. "Before pride costs you something you'll spend years regretting the way you regretted Jordan." I wrote Sam a letter, admitting my fear that choosing her meant fully closing a door I wasn't sure I'd truly processed. I also admitted, clearly, that fear didn't change the truth. I loved her, chose her, wanted a real future built with her. Sam didn't respond immediately, and the silence stretched painfully across nearly a week, testing every hopeful assumption I'd been holding on to. Meanwhile, Jordan called again, pressing for an answer, growing frustrated with my continued hesitation despite her honest, vulnerable confession weeks earlier. "I can't be your safety net while you figure out Sam," Jordan said sharply, some of her old defensiveness returning suddenly. Her comment stung, but also clarified something important. I wasn't confused about my feelings, only afraid of hurting people I cared about. I told Jordan gently but firmly that our chapter had genuinely closed, that I wished her healing, but my heart belonged elsewhere now. She was quiet for a long moment, then said she understood, admitting part of her had expected, even hoped for, that answer. "Go be happy," Jordan said finally. "You deserve that, even if it isn't with me the way we once imagined." That conversation freed something in me. Final, gentle closing of a door I'd been unconsciously leaving open too long. I drove straight to Sam's apartment afterward, uninvited, determined to fix things before another day of silence widened the distance further. She opened the door cautiously, surprise flickering across her face at finding me standing there, slightly breathless, clearly nervous. "I ended things clearly with Jordan," I said immediately. "There's no confusion left." No old door still cracked open anymore. Sam studied me carefully, arms crossed, guarded, though I noticed her expression softening slightly as I kept speaking honestly. I should have told you the moment she showed up, I admitted. I was scared. And I handled that fear badly. You did, Sam agreed quietly. But I understand fear better than most people, given everything I've been running from myself. She stepped aside, finally, letting me back into her apartment, into the fragile, rebuilding trust we both still desperately wanted. We talked for hours that night, rebuilding honesty piece by piece, agreeing no more secrets, however well-intentioned they seemed initially. Just as things felt steady again, Sam's mother called with an ultimatum that would force the biggest decision either of us had faced. Sam's mother demanded she attend a family gathering the following weekend, publicly reaffirm her engagement rumors, or lose all family ties permanently. They still think you're confused, I said carefully, watching Sam's jaw tighten with familiar, exhausted frustration at her family's persistent denial. Sam decided, finally, to attend. Not to comply, but to speak honestly, once and for all. Regardless of the painful consequences, she asked me to come with her, and though terrified, I agreed immediately, unwilling to let her face that room alone. The gathering took place at her aunt's house outside Milwaukee, extended family filling a room decorated with photographs from generations past. Sam's mother introduced me vaguely as a friend, and I watched Sam's hands clench, bracing herself for whatever came next. Instead of staying quiet, Sam stood, voice shaking slightly, and told her entire family the truth about who I actually was. "This is Alex," she said, "the woman I love. And I'm done pretending otherwise just to keep everyone else comfortable." The room fell painfully silent, some relatives exchanging uncomfortable glances, others simply staring, unsure how to respond appropriately at all. Her mother stood abruptly, visibly furious, insisting Sam was choosing rebellion over family, throwing away everything they'd built together over years. "I'm not choosing rebellion," Sam said steadily. "I'm choosing honesty, something this family has never particularly valued from me before." An older woman, Sam's grandmother, surprisingly spoke up then, saying quietly that love shouldn't require anyone's permission to simply exist. Her words shifted something in the room, not resolving everything instantly, but cracking open space for a conversation instead of ultimatums. Sam's mother, still angry, wasn't ready to accept things fully, but she didn't repeat her earlier threat about cutting Sam off entirely. We left the gathering that evening emotionally drained but strangely lighter, having survived something we'd both feared for months quietly. In the car, Sam finally cried, releasing years of careful silence, and I held her hand steady the entire drive home. "Whatever happens with them," she said, "I'm glad I finally said it out loud. Glad you were there beside me." Weeks passed, and while her family relationship remained complicated, small gestures suggested possible healing. A birthday card, a hesitant phone call. Meanwhile, Jordan sent one final letter, announcing she'd moved to Denver, started therapy, and found genuine peace outside old expectations entirely. She wished us happiness sincerely, closing the letter with gratitude for the years we'd shared, however painfully they eventually ended. Reading it, I felt only warmth, no lingering ache, proof that the door I'd closed had healed cleanly, completely, honestly. My newspaper editor approved a personal essay about our entire experience, believing it might help other queer families navigating similar painful situations. Writing it forced me to revisit every difficult moment, the waiting, the fear, the unexpected stranger who became my entire future. Sam read the draft first, tearing up at the section describing that empty cafe chair where our story had first begun. "You made me sound brave," she said, and I told her honestly, she'd always been exactly that. long before she believed it herself. The essay published to unexpected attention. Readers sharing their own stories of family rejection, quiet courage, and hard-won chosen family. Renata called to update us that Jordan's father faced formal review for his handling of the retreat placement, prompted by our testimony. Felt like justice. Imperfect and slow, but meaningful. Protecting future families from similarly manipulative, isolating religious programs going forward. Sam decided to start her own small architecture firm that winter, finally pursuing designs she'd sketched privately for years. Unafraid now, I supported her opening celebration, watching proudly as she spoke confidently about buildings, light, and spaces built for genuine belonging. Her mother attended, awkwardly, standing near the back, but present nonetheless. A small crack of reconciliation neither of us expected yet. That night, Sam took my hand outside the gallery, city lights reflecting off Lake Michigan, and asked me something unexpected, quietly serious. "Move in with me," she said. "Properly. No more separate apartments. No more uncertainty about where either of us truly belongs." I said yes immediately, certain in a way I'd never felt certain before. Not even during the years I'd loved Jordan. We spent the following month packing boxes, laughing over mismatched furniture, building a shared space that finally felt entirely, safely ours. On our first night in the new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes, Sam pulled out an old napkin sketch from months earlier. It was the cafe skyline she'd drawn that very first week, now framed, hanging proudly above our new, shared living room couch. "Every good building starts somewhere small," she said, smiling, "just like us. Starting from an empty chair in a coffee shop." I realized then that Jordan's absence hadn't broken my story. It had simply cleared space for the one I was always meant to live. A year later, I stood in that same cafe, ordering 2 coffees instead of 1, waiting for Sam instead of Jordan. This time, nobody left an empty chair. This time, love finally arrived, sat down, and simply, permanently stayed. Fendi.